Hi folks, welcome to Discover About Tarot. Just call me Mayfield, and thanks a ton for stopping by the study space. Today I have a goal and a question. The Hexen 2.0 Tarot doesn't deserve the status of worth more than its retail price. So just a quick disclaimer, I'm totally aware that there is already a conversation kind of going on around just income inequalities within the purchasing of tarot decks. I swear to God, I wrote this script like 3 weeks before all of that happened. And while I do have thoughts on that, I think I want to center my energies more towards OOP decks, or out of print decks. So let's go ahead and get started. Last I checked, the most I've seen the Hexen 2.0 Tarot sell for is like 300 bucks. But I have seen a copy sell for like $20 recently, which made me want to make this video. Like, that's part of like the inspiration for this video. Never mind, I was trying to work on a book report for this one, but I got a little sidetracked. So no, I wasn't the buyer, and yes, I'm still salty about it. But that's almost besides the point. So now my question is, are these out-of-print decks actually worth more than their retail price anyways? No more than a banana duct taped to a wall, I suppose. So let's see if I can lower its value by discussing three, or really more interrogating three different factors of outrageous prices of OOP decks. I invite you to do the same with a deck that's financially out of reach for you. Let's begin with the way we talk about tarot and just sort of expand from that. So I can appreciate how, for the most part, our community acknowledges the intense labor that it takes to make a tarot deck. Recently, Ben Belwen did actually have this article that breaks down the costs of making specifically an indie deck, which is definitely worth a read after you watch this. I mean, artists have to make a full brand new art pieces at least 78 times to make a full tarot deck, and more often than not, that is largely unpaid labor before that goes on to Kickstarter or Indiegogo or what have you. Because of all that work, it becomes pretty difficult to say anything bad about the quality of art, unless it's inside editions, of course. But generally, it's if you have nothing nice to say, don't say anything at all. And yet, I think that's a mistake on our part. I would argue that it's perfectly justified to offer more critique of the art itself without bashing the endeavors of the artist. I understand if we don't like something or it's not our aesthetic, we just kind of move on. But I think that's partially what got us into this mess. The inability to critique a product makes it less likely for its value to drop, and sometimes that's what we want. Namely, that's what I want. Let me model this with the Hexen 2.0. Obviously, I don't have this deck, but I do have the art book in all its glory. So I don't think I really heard anything about this deck when I learned about it. I think I was just looking up, cybernetic tarot decks, because I was like super into looking for some sort of tarot deck that had anything to do with cybernetics, robots, anything like that. But there was also like very little information or opinions on this deck. I remember looking through YouTube and hoping for like a more extensive review, but there were just like walkthroughs and just really quick surface level reviews, or just the dick writing reviews, which, I mean, no offense, but that's why it's over $300 now and I needed to stop. So it's almost like it's everyone's dirty little secret, and that's what makes it more alluring, I guess. As I said, I do have the art book, so if I wanted to, I could review it. And we do actually have a lot going on in this very mid deck. And if you guys aren't familiar with the linkity, mid means regular. Like, there's nothing really special about it. So like, here's an example of a couple of the cards. And yeah, this art book, when this thing says art book, like it's an art book. Like it's just the images that are just blown up to massive proportions. And as you can see, there's a bunch of words on here. The paintings are nice enough, but there's a lot of reading in each card. Or maybe like there's quite a bit of minimalism going on in here. My understanding is the deck is actually rather large, but if you don't have the art book, you can miss out on a lot of the text. And even then, it's still not really an accessible tarot deck. A lot of the text is missing context, and when that happens, it can be really overwhelming to try and decode what it would mean in a reading. So journaling with this would be on a whole other level. This isn't diary journaling. This is scholarly journaling with a few peers to review your work. And if you didn't understand that joke, that's how inaccessible this deck is for the common reader. My fear is that only highly educated people with money were able to bid high prices for this, but I may be assuming too much. Although it is a good segue. Now let's briefly talk about the free market in context of tarot, because that's the biggest argument / cope that people make when discussing high prices. The free market is an economic system without government intervention or regulation. So it's based purely on supply and demand, what you're willing to pay for it. Needless to say, this obviously isn't exclusive to tarot collecting, but there is quite the robust secondhand market. Plenty of opportunities and spaces to buy a used deck, whether it's cheaper, we prefer well-loved items, or it's out of print and it's the only way to get your hands on it. What I feel like is unique to tarot collecting and buying, however, is its ties to spiritual practices and the way we tie ourselves to anything that tugs our strings of fate. We have deck lust, we have soul decks, we have holy grail decks. We feel that deck was made for us and only us. But it's out of print and it's now selling on eBay for $500. Consumption is such a mundane activity and concept that we don't always discuss it aloud in conjunction with tarot. We don't even like trademarks on our card backs. Nothing to remind us that we're a target demographic for capitalism to prey on. It's probably why Inside Editions is so annoying to us sometimes. If my memory serves me correctly, Benabel has an old video that I can't seem to find anymore, discussing on how she feels about her Spirit Keeper's tarot being listed and sold for astronomical prices. I specifically remember how conflicted she was on one hand because she didn't think that it made a whole lot of sense for her deck to be that expensive and felt that buyers spent so much money on it. Yet, I think she begrudgingly, maybe, recognized it was a free market. People can spend however much they want on something that they think is worth that price. And Benabel, by the way, if you're watching this, and I completely just misinterpreted your thoughts and feelings, I truly apologize. You're more than welcome to roast me in the comments if you want. But again, this also boils down to the way that we discuss these matters. If we have a free market, why not have free discourse for negotiations or questions on what we think is worth something? The only way we're able to do that is silently not purchase anything, also known as voting with your wallet. In the Tarot Marketplace group on Facebook, for example, not only is it against the rules to comment on the pricings people make, which is pretty understandable considering that, you know, it could curve any possibility for bullying, but one of my comments actually got deleted when I answered someone else's question about how much the Hexen 2.0 is generally worth. But which, by the way, it usually sits for $600 to $700, but it can sell at $300 sometimes, depending on how genuine the pictures look. If it looks like the picture was posted like on Amazon, forget it. Auctions also tend to work better. Which does lead me to wonder what the difference is between free market and price gouging. On eBay, decks like the indie version of the Fyodor Pavlov Tarot, as well as the Yokai Yochi Tarot, Both of those were listed as on like buy it now for $500 almost immediately after the wards shipped and before leftovers were even announced. Like, those listings, not the deck, but the listings did not earn being priced that much so early on. I would believe it if they got to those high prices through auction. I'd argue that's price gouging though, because suddenly you feel like you have no choice but to buy it in the off chance that you missed out on it, which is like super cruel and ridiculous to me. I think the most I've seen, like for an auction, for example, to go up, however, is it was like an RWS deck that was from the 1910s. I think it was like one of the first printings of the RWS. It started out at like 99 cents because the seller inherited it and didn't really have much info about it. I remember it because the listing specifically specified that it was it belonged to like their grandmother or something like that, and if anybody has information on it, please let them know. But it ended at like $2,000. That's free market right there. What's the purpose of spending a whole month's rent in the bad part of a SoCal town for a deck of cards? If it counts as a collectible, I mean, do you get to write it off on your taxes? Especially if you get it authenticated? If you remember that banana on the wall joke I made earlier, that's basically what happened. That banana's gonna rot, you guys. No one's putting that on their wall. Art YouTuber Kat Graffin discusses her insights on NFTs in the context of art collecting. They used the example of the banana that was like duct taped to a wall that sold for $150,000. It's just speculation that they share, of course, but I feel it might be like a little relevant here. In the off chance that people are paying luxury amounts for cards to get it authenticated, could possibly be to hoard wealth through either tax evasion or money laundering. I know that's like a high accusation, but this is just like an alleged hypothetical thing that could happen. But on the other hand, if somebody purchased this from like genuine want and desire, that's a lot. Even for spiritual reasons, like how does one get that amount of value back? That's a legitimate question that I'm asking. So if you bought like a secondhand deck for more than $100, I'm genuinely curious on that experience. And if you're comfortable with sharing, I would love to hear about how, I mean just about how. But with no experiences to pull from on my end, like my hunch is to just make your own. Hey, look, another good segue. I propose another question. Is pirating an out-of-print deck ethical? Or at least not unethical? You know what I'm saying? If I'm more long-winded in this segment, it's because I'm trying to choose my words very carefully and cover all of my bases, because this is a very delicate topic. So we know that pirated decks are inherently unethical. It's a growing problem for mass market and indie deck creators alike, and I've linked some resources in the description as well, so you're better equipped on how to avoid them. Personally, I don't condone the purchasing of counterfeit decks because I don't know what I'm supporting, although I wouldn't shame anyone for purchasing like a knockoff deck by accident. That's not what I'm arguing. I'm saying that if an artist of an OOP deck has each and every card available on their website for anyone to view, copy, or save, watermarked or otherwise, you have no intentions of selling this deck as the real deal, because then that would immediately be unethical. Is it fair game to pirate this deck, this product, for your own personal use? Let's take it a bit farther and say that you pledge to purchase from the artist the equivalent or more of what you paid to get that counterfeit made. Unethical? Let's say you go the extra mile and specify on your pirated product that it's a reproduction copy. Is it still unethical? I know it's probably technically illegal, but we're not talking about legality. We're talking ethics. Yes, there is a difference. I am genuinely also asking for opinions. My opinion is that it might not be unethical to print your own copy of something that you couldn't get your hands on otherwise, but I recognize there is a danger of having something like that floating around. I will also be honest in that I don't think that pirated copies would really diminish the value of real copies as much as I need this to, and that's because a real version would be vastly preferred over a fake one, or at least I hope so. Hypothetically speaking, if I had a fake copy of the Hexen 2.0, I would buy a real one in a heartbeat if it was reprinted. Heck, I would buy 2 copies just to have them. Going back to how much respect we give the artists, we're always ready to support them directly. I absolutely hate that this video technically started as a book report in the script writing phase and ended with a rant with intent to lower value. But I think it's important to have a conversation about tarot prices, both secondhand, out of print, and mass market and indie products. I was gonna say not as a means to complain, unless you need to vent like I did, but to keep the discourse alive. And yeah, I mean, things in general are getting more expensive. Rent, groceries, not books, weirdly enough, but tarot decks, yes. We should be able to address what we value and what we're willing to spend our increasingly diminishing disposable income on. Suzanne Treister, I will happily buy two of your decks at retail list price. I've heard that the cardstock is pretty thin, but I'd be willing to buy it for around 30 bucks a pop. Eyebrows. Yeah, I mean, for the rest of my audience, I would totally encourage you to share your thoughts and feelings on all this. I mean, all I ask is to make discourse not war, because apparently war already happened, if we can even call it that. But I do genuinely think that it's important to be able to be honest about this kind of stuff. I understand that there might be like some sort of taboo things, whether it be asking for a discount or for a free product, but at the end of the day, who cares? Like, I know that I fully recognize, like, and want to acknowledge, like, my own privilege in being able to have this disposable income to purchase on decks. Ever since my depth year, I honestly haven't really purchased much. I think I maybe purchased 1 deck in the last 3 months, to be honest. And I'm lucky enough to be able to, like, if I wanted to, I could potentially buy 1 deck a month and still be relatively okay. And yeah, I mean, it's important to be able to recognize that deck prices are kind of getting up there. Remember the Yokayochi and the Fyodor Pavlov tarot? Those were like for their Kickstarter phase, those 2 were around 50 bucks a pop. And that's pretty reasonable for such beautiful products that we ended up with. I couldn't imagine going to a Kickstarter right now and purchasing, like, I couldn't imagine buying a deck for $70 or $60. That's nuts to me. But I get that inflation happens and artists have to eat too. But if you haven't already, subscribe for more academic tarot nonsense. Until next time, see ya.